Okay, welcome to Storytime Live with Srta Pikula. I hope that you're all doing well. And thanks for tuning in today. So this is our second to last story time for the year because it's second to last day of school. So I hope all of you are doing well and having a great day. And um, I can't think of like any shout out to give today because if I was going to give a shout out today, it'd be to every single one of you in my class, which I've done already. I've already done that. Um, so maybe I should just give a shout out to everyone. Anyways, a shout out to my whole class. It was so awesome. I am filled with such swelling pride of every single one of you. You have all worked so hard this year, and you only have one day left of second grade, and then you have the summer, and then you can be in third grade. And it went. You guys worked so hard this year, and you learned so much, even with this crazy distance learning thing that we're doing. I am so truly, truly proud of all of you. You all worked very, very hard, and I wanted you to know that. So, anyways, we're gonna try to read between today and tomorrow, one more chapter in Voyage to the Dawn Treader. But look, hey, we're almost like halfway through the book. So it's good. So you guys can find the book somewhere and keep reading it if you'd like to with your family after the next 2 days. But when we were last here, we noticed that uh, Eustace turned back into a boy, and Edmund found him first, and he explained to Edmund what happened to him. And he's like, but he wanted to only tell Edmund because he's like, it was really weird, and I don't know if everyone else believed me if if um if I told them. And he told them, and it was that he saw Aslan. He saw Aslan, and Aslan spoke to him kind of in his head. He didn't actually speak to him, but he spoke to him in his head. You could hear him in his head. And he kept peeling off layers and layers of scales, kind of like how, like his skin, how snakes shed their skin, how they molt. Eustace kept doing this, but it wouldn't work. He wanted to get out of all of his dragon skin, so eventually Aslan helped him. And Aslan took off the skin, and he was able to swim and bathe in this well. And then Aslan gave him new clothes, and he was a boy again. And Aslan made Eustace new, and they were also happy to see Eustace again, and they all got the Dawn Treader ready um, to get going. And Eustace, he still got really annoying once in a while, but for the most part, he began to be a much nicer boy. He was a much nicer boy. And they took Lord Octavian's arm ring and they flung it up to where there was an inscription about that this was Dragon Island, which was discovered by Prince Caspian or King Caspian the 10th. And then no one ever got that armband again of Lord Octavian. And they started off again on their voyage. So let's see what happened to them next. Chapter 8. 2 narrow escapes. Everyone was cheerful as the Dawn Treaders sailed from Dragon Island. They had fair winds as soon as they were out of the bay, and came early the next morning to the unknown land, which some of them had seen when flying over the mountains while Eustace was still a dragon. It was a low green island inhabited by nothing but rabbits and a few goats. But from the ruins of stone huts and from blackened places where fires had been, they judged that it had been peopled not long before that. There was also some bones and broken weapons. Pirates' work, said Caspian. Or the dragons, said Edmund. The only other thing they found was there was a little skin boat, or coracle, on the sands. It was made of hide stretched over a wicker framework. It was a tiny boat, barely 4 feet long, and the paddle which still lay in it was in proportion. mean it was like the right size for the little boat. Um, Mm-mm. They thought that either it had been made for a child or else that the people of the country had been dwarfs. Reepicheep decided to keep it, as it was just the right size for him, so it was taken on board. They called that land Burnt Island and sailed away before them. After some 5 days, they ran before a southeast wind, out of the sight of all the lands and seeing neither fish nor gull. Then they had a day when it rained hard till the afternoon. Eustace lost 2 games of chess to Reepicheep and begun to get like his old and disagreeable self again. And Edmund said that he wished that they had gone to America with Susan. Then Lucy looked out of the stern windows and said, "Hello, do believe it's Stat. And what's that?" They all tumbled up onto the poop deck and found that the rain had stopped and that Drinian, who was on watch, was also staring hard at something astern, or rather, at several things. They looked like they looked a little like smooth, rounded rocks, a whole line of them with intervals about 40 feet between them. But they can't be rocks, Drinian was saying, because they weren't there 5 minutes ago. And one's just disappeared, said Lucy. Yes, and there's another one coming up, said Edmund. And nearer, said Eustace. Hang it, said Caspian. The whole thing is moving this way. And moving a great deal quicker than we can sail, sire, said Drinian. It'll be up with us in a minute. They all held their breath, for it was not at all nice to be pursued by an unknown something either on land or sea. But what it turned out to be was far worse than anyone had suspected. Suddenly, only about a length of a cricket pitch from their port side, an appalling head reared itself out of the sea. It was all greens and vermilions with purple blotches, except where shellfish clung to it, and it's shaped rather like a horse's, though without ears. It had enormous eyes made for staring through dark depths of the ocean, and a gaping mouth filled with double rows of sharp fish-like teeth. It came up on what they first took to be a huge neck, but as more and more of it emerged, everyone knew that it was not its neck but its body, and that at least they were seeing what so many people had foolishly wanted to see, the great sea serpent. The folds of its gigantic tail could be seen far away, rising at intervals from the surface, and now its head was towering up higher than the mast. Every man rushed to his weapon, but there was nothing to be done. The monster was out of reach. Shoot! Shoot! Cried the master bowman, and several obeyed, but the arrows glanced off the sea serpent's hide as if it were iron plated. Then, for a dreadful minute, everyone was still staring up at its eyes and mouth and wondering where it would pounce. But it didn't pounce. It shot its head forward across the ship on a level with the yard of the mast. Now its head was just beside the fighting top. Still, it stretched and stretched till its head was over the starboard bulwark. Then down it began to come, not onto the crowded deck, but into the water, so that the ship was under an arch of serpent. And almost at once that arch began to get smaller. Indeed, on the starboard, the sea serpent was now almost touching the Dawn Treader's side. Eustace, who had been really trying very hard to behave well till the rain and the chest put him back, now did the first brave thing he had ever done in his life. He was wearing a sword that Caspian had lent him. As soon as the serpent's body was near enough the starboard side, he jumped onto the bulwark and began hacking at it with all his might. It is true that he accomplished nothing beyond breaking Caspian's second best sword into bits, but it was a fine thing for a beginner to do. Others would have joined him if at that moment Reepicheep had not called out, Don't fight! Push! It was so unusual for the mouse to advise anyone not to fight that even though in that terrible moment every eye turned to him, and when he jumped up onto the bulwark forward of the snake and set his little furry back against its huge, scaly, slimy back, and began pushing as hard as he could. Quite a few number of people saw that he meant what he meant, and rushed to both sides of the ship to do the same. And when, at a moment later, the sea serpent's head appeared again, this time on the port side, and this time with its back to them. Then everyone understood. The brute had made a loop of itself around the Dawn Treader and was beginning to draw the loop tight. When it was quite tight, snap, there would be floating matchwood where the ship had been, and it would pick them out of the water one by one. Their only chance was to push the loop backwards till it slid over the stern, or else, to put the same thing another way, to push the ship forward out of the loop. Reepicheep alone had, of course, no more chance of doing this than of lifting a cathedral, but he had nearly killed himself with trying before the others shoved him aside. Very soon, the whole ship's company, except Lucy and the mouse, which was fainting, was in two lines alongside the two bulwarks, and each man's chest was to the back of the man in the front, so that the weight of the whole line was in at the last man pushing for their lives. For a few sickening seconds, which seemed like hours, nothing appeared to happen. Joints cracked, sweat dropped, breath came out in grunts and gasps. Then they felt that the ship was moving. They saw that the snake loop was further from the mast than it had been, but they also saw that it was smaller. And now the real danger was at hand. Could they get it over the poop deck, or was it already too tight? Yes, it would just fit. It was resting on the poop rails. A dozen or more sprang onto the deck. This was far better. The sea serpent's body was so low now that they could make a line across the poop deck and push side by side. Hope rose high till everyone remembered the high carved stern, the dragon tail of the Dawn Treader. It would be quite impossible to get the brute over that. An axe, cried Caspian hoarsely, and still shove. Lucy, who knew where everything was, heard him when she was standing on the main deck staring up at the poop deck. In a few seconds, she had been below, got the axe, and was rushing up the ladder to the poop deck. But just as she reached the top, there came a great crashing noise, like a tree coming down, and the ship rocked and darted forward. For at that very moment, whether because the sea serpent was being pushed so hard, or because it foolishly decided to draw the noose tight, the whole of the carved stern broke off, and the ship was free. The others were too exhausted to see what Lucy saw. There, a few yards behind them, the loop of the sea serpent's body was rapidly smaller and disappeared into a splash. Lucy always said, but of course she was very excited at the moment, and it may have only been her imagination, that she saw a look of idiotic satisfaction on the creature's face. What is certain was that it was a very stupid animal, for instead of pursuing the ship, it turned its head around and began nosing all along its own body as if it expected to find the wreckage of the Dawn Treader there. But the Dawn Treader was already well away, running before a fresh breeze, and the men lay and sat panting and groaning all about the deck, till presently they were able to talk about it, and then to laugh about it. And when some rum had been served out, they even raised a cheer, and everyone praised the valor of Eustace, although it hadn't done any good, and of Reepicheep. After this, they sailed for 3 more days and saw nothing but sea and sky. On the fourth day, on the fourth day, the wind changed to the north and the seas began to rise. By the afternoon, it had nearly become a gale. But at that time, they sighted land on their port below. By your leave, sire, said Jernian, we will try to get under the lee of that country by rowing and lying in the harbor, maybe till it's over. Caspian agreed, but a long row against the gale did not bring them to land before evening. By the last night of the day, they steered into the natural harbor and anchored, but no one went ashore that night. In the morning, they found themselves in the green bay of a rugged, lonely-looking country, which sloped up a rocky summit. From the windy north beyond the summit, clouds came streaming rapidly. They lowered the boat and loaded her with any of the water casks, which were now empty. Which stream shall we water at, Jernian? Said Caspian, as he took his seat in the stern sheets of the boat. There seem to be 2 coming down into the bay. It makes a little odd, sire, said Jernian, but I think it's a shorter pull to that on the starboard, the eastern one. Here comes the rain, said Lucy. I should think it does, said Edmund, for it was already pelting hard. I say, let's go to the other stream. There are trees there, and we'll have some shelter. Yes, let's do that, said Eustace. No point in getting wetter than we need. But all that time, Drinian was steadily steering to the starboard, like tiresome people in cars who continue at 40 miles an hour, while you are explaining to them that they are going on the wrong road. They're right, Drinian, said Caspian. Why don't you bring her head around and make for the western stream? As your majesty pleases, said Drinian a little shortly. He had had an anxious day with the weather all yesterday, and he didn't like advice from landsmen. But he altered the course, and it turned out afterwards that it was a good thing he did. By the time they had finished watering, the rain was over, and Caspian, with Eustace, the Pevensies, and Reepicheep, decided to walk up to the top of the hill and see what could be seen. It was a stiffish climb through the coarse grass and heather, and they saw neither man nor beast except seagulls. When they reached the top, they saw there was a very small island, with no more than 20 acres. And from this height, the sea looked larger and more desolate than it had from the deck, or even fighting the top of the Dawn Treader. Crazy, said Eustace to Lucy in a low voice, looking at the eastern horizon, sailing on and on into that which, with no idea of what we may get to. But he only said it out of habit, not really nastily as he would have done at one time. It was too cold to stay long at the ridge, for the wind still blew freshly from the north. Don't let's go back the same way, said Lucy as they turned. Let's go along the bit and come down by the other stream, the one that Drinian wanted to go to. Everyone agreed to this, and after about 15 minutes, they were at the source of the second river. It was a more interesting place than they had expected. A deep little mountain lake surrounded by cliffs, except for a narrow channel on the seaward side out of which the water flowed. Here at last they were out of the wind, and all sat down in the heather above the cliff for a rest. And all sat down but one, it was Edmund, jumped up again very quickly. They go in for sharp stones on this island, he said, groping about in the heather. Where is the wretched thing? Oh, I've got it. Hello! It wasn't a stone at all. It's a sword hilt. No, by Jove, it's a whole sword. What rust it has left on it? It must have lain here for ages. Narnian too, by the look of it, said Caspian as they all crowded around. I'm sitting on something too, said Lucy, something hard. It turned out to be the remains of a mail shirt. By this time, everyone was on their hands and knees, feeling in the thick heather in every direction. Their search revealed one by one a helmet, a dagger, a few coins, not Kellerman crescents, but genuine Narnian lions and trees, such as you might see any day in the marketplace of Beaversdam or Verona. Looks as if this might all be all that is left of one of our 7 lords, said Edmund. Just as I was thinking, said Caspian. I wonder which it was. There was nothing on the dagger to show, and I wondered how he died. And how we are to avenge him, added Reepicheep. Edmund, the only one of the party who had read several detective stories, had meanwhile been thinking. Look here, he said, there's something very fishy about this. He can't have been killed in a fight. Why not? Said Caspian. No bones, said Edmund. An enemy might take the armor and leave the body. But who ever heard of a chap who'd won a fight and fight carrying away the body and leaving the armor? Perhaps he was killed by a wild animal, Lucy suggested. It'd be a clever animal, said Edmund, that would take a man's mail shirt. Perhaps a dragon, said Caspian. Nothing doing, said Eustace. A dragon couldn't do it. I ought to know that. Well, let's get away from this place anyway, said Lucy. She had not felt like sitting down again since Edmund had raised the question of bones. If you'd like, said Caspian, getting up, I don't think any of this stuff is worth taking anyways. And that is where we're going to stop for today. I hope that you enjoying that part of the chapter, and we'll finish the second part of the chapter tomorrow. And I hope that all of you have a really great rest of your day, and we have one more day of school. So we'll see you tomorrow, everyone.